Okay, so our flight tonight will be from Ontario, California to Phoenix, Arizona, and we're going to be using the RAFI 4 departure, and we will transition at Avery. So we'll take off to the west and pick up at Seoul and then down to Elbow and out to Avery. And not long after we get to Avery, we'll pick up Blythe VOR and fly our star of Hydra 1 into Phoenix. And our approach will be runway 26, and we'll be using the RNAV, and we'll transition here at Iowa, or India Whiskey Alpha, and then I guess pick up Touray. We'll see what happens. So here's the flight, 282 miles as the crow flies. So we are beginning our flight today in Ontario, California, and we're going to be taking off to the west and flying to Phoenix. So here is our route. We'll be using the other thing I have done is planned out my flight in SimBrief and generated the flight and my PDF. And I'll put it over on my second screen. So let's get started. So let's start with our flight bag and go to ground, and we'll turn on our GPU and open the main door and the cargo door. You cannot turn on the main door lights until you hear the door completely open, which just happened. So all those are on. Then there's a button here that says Static Elements page. You click on that, and this is where you remove your covers. So I'm clicking Remove All Covers, and then going back to the main ground page, and then clicking this Home button. Now over to the cockpit and our overhead. We start with emergency power by arming that, and then our main batteries, and then external power. Turn off this annoying thing. I'm going to turn on Warn Inhibit. Let's see if that helps. Now the display system control, that's over here. These are the four knobs that turn on the screens down below. And we'll turn on our nav lights. And if it were night, I would turn on the logo and wheel well, but I can turn on no smoking. Then click these two left buttons so that they turn dark. Then we have the EBHA. I'm not sure what that is, but those, and the UPS needs to be turned on. Then the final thing we do in this first section is run a fire test of the APU. We drop down to the center panel, and we've got our IRSs. I open them all up first, click them all on, and then close them up. Then back to our EFB and click Flight Plan. Then click Import Data from SimBrief. And here is the flight number that you'll enter a little bit later. Mine always shows November 653 Foxtrot X-ray, no matter what, so I'm not sure if that's going to be the same for you or not. Then you click down here if you want to get the weather, and you can just start typing in the airport and hit enter, and up comes the weather. Next, click Set Fuel Payload. You'll feel a little bump, and that's the only thing you're going to sense. Other than that, you really don't know if anything's happened. Not ideal. Click the home button, and then over to the fuel payload, and insert SimBrief data, and then click the set button, and it will start counting down. So it starts with a full load of fuel and then counts down to whatever SimBrief has indicated as our fuel load. Then you click boarding. Takes you back to this screen, and you click Take Passengers to Plane. I never pay much attention, but you will get a call from the driver that everything is loaded and the doors are closed. Next, and this is optional, you can turn on the cabin lights. You can do that here. Turn on all the lights and go to the next page, and you can turn all those lights on. Now, you should turn them off before you take off as a courtesy. I'll see if I remember. Alright, that takes care of the EFB for right now. Let's head over to our MCDU. Click Pause Ent, and then the GPS 1. So this is the R3 button, and it will say loaded, and then click Flight Plan, and then Direct Link Flight Plan, and here's where you put in that flight number. November 653 Foxtrot X-ray, and then the L2 button. After you do that, click Send Request and wait until you see that the data has been received down in the scratch pad, and then click Flight Plan Review. That's the R5 button, and you can see our basic route, and then click Activate. So the last thing you want to do is enter your destination here. I'll clear that. Click the destination button, that would be R4, and then click L4 to insert it. You have to close up the flight plan, and that's how you do it, even though you still are going to be entering your SID and your star and runways and all that. So click Departure. We're at Ontario, and we're going to be taking off from 26 left. We're going to be using the Raji SID and transitioning at Avery. Here is that spelled out, and we activate it. And you'll see that it puts in any restricted altitudes.
And main door closed.
All right, we just got notice that everyone's in the airplane and the door is closed. All right, click the nav button and then arrival, star, and we're using the Hydra 1, and we're transitioning at the Blythe VOR. And our approach is going to be RNAV 26 on the next page. And we will be transitioning at the VOR India Whiskey Alpha. And then we activate. So that's all there is to getting your route in. You can put in airways, and it uses the airway name. So for instance, J123, then a period, and then the ending waypoint. But we're not doing that in this case. So we can review the plan. So let's go up to this panel here. This is the display controller. And then you click the map, and then you can click north if you desire. There you go. So that's the L3 button. So we've got north. And by the way, you can change this screen to full, which is kind of handy in this case. And notice we've got a range here of 150, and I'm just scrolling to change the range. So once you have that, then you can click the next button to scroll through it. And once you're satisfied with that, you click heading, or change this to heading, and you're back at your starting point. Now we need to enter our performance numbers on the MCDU, dropping down to the MCDU and clicking perf ent. Nothing on this screen. I'm not going to do anything on this screen. I'm going with the defaults, but if you wanted to change your climb speeds, cruise, and descent, you do that here. You can also put in your speed limit for your approach if you desire, but I am not, and you return over here. I'll go to the next page. This is page 3 of 5, and you put in your fuel reserve, which in my case is 668. And then this is takeoff and landing fuel, which is basically what it takes to taxi. So it's saying Ontario is 242. And I'm just going to assume it's going to be similar, but it'll probably be less in Phoenix. Then you go to the next screen. Cruise altitude is going to be flight level 410.
Refueling complete, and here is your load sheet paper, sir.
Oh, great. Our fuel is loaded, and it's going to put a couple of pieces of paper here, which are basically meaningless. So, cruise winds. Got 210 at 24. And by the way, I'm just reading off my load sheet PDF from SimBrief. And it's 24 knots. The transition will be flight level 180. And my ISA deviation, I'm just going to go with the standard deviation for right now. Then we go to the next screen and we enter our fuel here, and it's simply this. So we enter 2656, whatever's in the parens. And then our cargo, looking back at my load sheet, is 400 kilograms. And the number of passengers are 16. And I'll go with 60 kilograms. And once you're done with page 5 of 5, then you can confirm the init, and that settles it. By the way, it's possible when you get to this screen, this is still counting down. So just use the fuel that's on your flight plan in SimBrief, because it takes a while for it to count down. But when it's finished, you will get that notification. Go back to our flight plan, and you can see that the altitudes have now been put in. And you can also turn on this vertical profile here and turn it on and off by the checkbox and go to full screen and so on. But I want to be able to watch these numbers for my startup. So that takes care of programming the MCDU, and now we'll get ready to start things up. Click on nav and then set FMS 1, and you do the same on the other side. And then after that's done, you can turn your attention to the MCP or this glare shield. So you arm both LNAV and VNAV. And I'll set my altitude. Flight level 410. Heading will be 260. Speed we'll just keep at 200. And we'll also set our baro, which is 2995. All right, back to our EFB, and we're going to do the calculations for takeoff, our fuel, and this I'm just scrolling to get these numbers in there. That's close enough. And the one runway length I checked with Siri, and it's telling me 3100 for 10,200. And my outside temperature is 37. And elevation is 900 feet. $970, I think. And then we can send this data to the FMS. And you won't get any indication until you get over to the display controller. So I'll click that and then go over to my display controller and click flight rough, and you can see that the V speeds have been entered. And you can click to begin your weather radar. I've never really seen it work well, but anyway, it's on the checklist, so we do it. And the mode for that is standby. All right, back to our overhead. So we've got the masters that we want to turn on. And then we go down to our MCDU number 3, which is here. All right, so you click menu and then this first item and then cabin and turn on all the power for that section. Then go back to the radio. Back to our overhead, and let's start our APU. So turn on fuel in the left tank and click master. And it will take a while to spool up once you click start, but we're waiting for the ready button. It will light up right here in just a moment. There it is, and we'll click start. Page 2. And once that settles in at 100%, turn on the bleed arrow on the APU and the isolation valve. External power is still on, so we can make that available, and then go back to our ground and turn that off. And since we're here, why don't we just close the door and remove the chocks. And now we can start the engines. So let's turn on our beacon to let folks know what's happening, and turn on our seat belt, and then the right main tank, and then click the master start, and we'll start with this right engine. And you can see it's spooling up here, and once it hits 25, you can add fuel. And let's start the second engine. And it's spooling up, so we can add fuel. And then once the engines have settled, zoom in here, once our TGT kind of settles in, it looks like it's going to settle in about 471, then we can go back to our panel and finish our checklist for after starting. So engine bleeds on, and APU bleed and isolation off, and now we can stop the APU, and this takes a while to drop. So while it's doing that, we can turn on our alternate and turn on our packs. And once this hits 0 or below 10, then you can turn it off. And now we turn on all of our anti-ice And that pretty much completes our after engine start checklist. All right, before we taxi, a couple of notches of flaps, and that's evident over here on this panel. It's interesting, there's very few rivets here. I'm not sure if that's legit or not, but anyway. So back to our cabin lights, turn those off or dim them. Taxi light on. Check our spoilers. All good. And our control surfaces, which you can see down here. Everything seems to be good. I would turn on the wingtip lights if it were night. That is kind of like a flood that emanates from the end of the wings down to the ground. Kind of cool. And the wheel well light I would turn off. And then the transponder, let me set that to TA only. And set my auto brake tier to RTO. And finally, parking brake off. All right, we're ready for takeoff. I want to check my reverse, make sure that's working. And it is. And I want to set my ground spoilers, and that's done down here. And then I'll go ahead and set my to TARA, might set my transponder to TARA. And then landing lights on, pulse on, turn off taxi, strobe on. All these are set properly. And I'll turn on my chronograph, and we are ready for takeoff. Once I get lined up, I'll turn on my auto thrust, which will automatically trigger toga. So toga is triggered with, there's a little button down here. You can see my the hand pointer. So when I click that, you'll see TO appear here. So I'll start by advancing the throttle. There's that little piece of paper, get rid of that. So advance the throttle and then click that button. There we go. And it advances to toga. This thing wants to climb like crazy, so you gotta keep the nose down, and then autopilot on, and flaps 1, flaps retracted, and we start our SID. Now you don't have to do anything, everything is just set. The only thing that you have to do once you reach 10,000 feet is turn off your lights, 1800, flight level 180, set your baro to standard, and then before you reach your top of descent, just dial down your altitude and it will automatically begin the descent. So we must be at one of our altitude restrictions, 4,000 feet. So 4,000 feet and then 7,000 for Raji. Check our MCDU. So Raji's 7,000 feet. So again, there's really nothing to do. It's just going to take over from here. can set our auto brake to off. So maybe we can turn the lights back on. And there we go, we're climbing after Raji. And now I think we can just climb to flight level 410. Now you can control these maps with these buttons here and this one here, so I can change this to full now that our engines are set. But you can also change what you see on these by clicking these various odds and ends. And you can also do it on the other side. So if you want to put engine controls on the other side, you can do that. There we go. Gosh. Man. Alright, so we'll just let it climb. Nothing much is going to happen. I'll turn off the seatbelt and standardize our barrel. And just let it go. And probably change this again. This is just a matter of scrolling. Took me a while to figure that out. And here's our, of course, our top of descent. Thing gets to altitude pretty quickly. All right, we are at altitude. Just over the edge of the Salton Sea. And not much to do except check our top of descent. So down here, go to performance and to cruise. And we have 41 miles to top of descent. Doesn't seem like very far, but and I'm going to set my altitude to the decision height for my approach of the Phoenix, which is an RNAV 26. And I'm looking at the chart now on my other screen, and that's 1390. So you can see we're going to come up on it very quickly. Everything looks good there. I'm not sure what standby means. So crank this down. $13.90. You can see on our screen our top of descent here, just after Avery. And you wonder why the top of descent is so far out from Phoenix. Let's check our star and see what that looks like. See what our altitude restrictions are. Yeah, so our transition is Blythe, and 35 miles we need to be down to 25,000, or flight level 250. So that's why we start down early. All right, we're coming up on our top of descent, and there's a little indicator over here, and you'll see this little green mark begin to drop. Now, I was alarmed at first because it's a little bit past the arrow, but it does happen. You'll see it start sliding down. Need to find out what this means. It's not the transponder, because that's over here. All right, here's our little indicator dropping. And now we begin our descent, and you don't have to do anything. It takes care of it for you. So all I have to do is check my baro at Phoenix so that I can set it at flight level 180. And right now that's 2982. With an outside temperature of 45 Celsius, that's hot. So that first altitude restriction was Skoll at 25, or flight level 250. So it's doing a pretty good job of sticking to that altitude. We'll see. So we're coming up on flight level 180. So we'll want to set our baro. So we're now on page 2 of our route, or our star, and we're to be between flight level 1900 and 15,000 at Hydra. So we are coming up on Gila, I believe. So I want to put on our baro, which was 2982. So that is set. Seat belts, please. Zoom out a little bit, or zoom in, I should say. So we've got a flight restriction here at Agla, and that's between 11,000 and 14,000. So we look pretty good there. And then for Cabo, our restriction is 9,000. So you can see that this aircraft sticks to those restricted altitudes brilliantly. Again, you can see we just passed Agrela and headed to Chabo, 9,000 feet, and then Lamo, 7,000 feet. So descending down to that 9,000. I've applied the speed brake here because we're supposed to be down to 210. And 9,000 feet. So next is Lamo at 7,000 feet, and we are descending. And we've got the airport off to the right, or I'm sorry, we've got the airport off to the left. You can see it here. Alright, we're making our turn here at the VOR. This is our initial approach fix. And next will be Todre. Again, this is an RMP approach, so I'm not worried about setting any ILS frequencies. I'll just want to click that approach button. Not quite sure how to turn these up. Ah. There we go. All right, we want to be at 5,000 feet. So we're getting there. And right after we turn, I'll click the approach button. I'm going to dial in a notch of flaps. Now there is a landing perf page as well. And 1,100 feet. And send the data to the FMS. And let me click that button. For our approach. And here is our, let's see, a VREF of 110. And here's our runway way out here. Oh, another notch of flaps. And our final approach fix is Tinkum. Gear down. Oops, I forgot my landing lights. That should have come on at 10,000. So vertical glide path. And it looks like we're right on the target. Final flaps. Our VREF again is 110. set the auto brake to high. My frame rate has really dropped. That usually helps. Guess I'm gonna have to turn off some more stuff. Alright, autopilot off. Okay. And the FBO is at the end on the right, so I'll get off here, but start retracting my flaps. And turn off my landing lights and strobe. Alright, I'm going to just stop it here. And hopefully you can figure out how to shut it down.